Hello, my name is Beth Robinette, and I'm one of your instructors for this course, Introduction to the Foundations of Holistic Management. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the 4 ecosystem processes. So, when we're looking at a piece of land and we're trying to decide what we want to do to manage it, we kind of have to work on our literacy, our eco literacy, or how we read the conditions of what's happening at the soil surface. And within holistic management, we think about this through the 4 ecosystem processes. So, this is how we learn how to understand the language of the land. We can also think of this as 4 windows looking into the same room in a house. And by kind of peering through each of these windows, we're getting a different perspective or insight into what's happening inside. So they're just a lot of these are different ways to look at the same thing or interpret the same information. But here's kind of some ways to try to parse it apart. So first off, we have the water cycle, which is the movement of water from the atmosphere to the soil or oceans, where it nourishes plant animal life, and eventually back to the atmosphere. We have the mineral cycle, which is the movement of mineral nutrients from soil to plants and animals, and then back to soil again. And we have community dynamics or succession, or you can think of this as biodiversity, which is the ever changing dynamics within a biological community. This process is ongoing due to the constant interplay of species, changing composition, and changing microenvironment. Um, and then finally, we have energy flow, which is the flow of energy from the sun to green growing plants, which convert that energy through photosynthesis to the food that fuels all life. So when we think about the water cycle, we're really thinking about how effectively are we able to capture and keep water that falls to the soil surface. If you think about when a water droplet, a drop of rain, leaves a cloud in the sky, think about how much velocity it has by the time it actually hits the earth. And we want to create the conditions for that raindrop to land and gently infiltrate into the soil, not bust apart or run off and take a bunch of topsoil with it in the form of erosion. So we want soil that is covered, that has an easy to infiltrate surface, kind of just creating like this gentle catcher's mitt for each drop of rain so that we can create as an effective water cycle as possible. And then how do we retain the water that's in the soil, not lose it in the form of evaporation? Uh, this this picture, by the way, it shows a grazing trial that we did comparing some short duration, high density grazing with low density, season long grazing. So the picture on the left hand side is basically 2 Jersey cows, dry dairy cows that were turned out to graze a piece of ground all summer long. And that was alternated in strips with a trial using 100,000 pounds of beef per acre, basically ultra high density mob grazing. Um, and this is about 14 days or so after animals came off of this paddock. This is also irrigated conditions, so this has gotten some water on it, um, or we've added some water to it. But if you think about each of these different soil surfaces, try to intuit which side is going to be a softer place for a water droplet to land. And then think about which of those soil surfaces is going to be able to retain that moisture and keep it from evaporating. We'll talk about that more in class. Nutrient cycle. This is how effectively are we moving minerals through the system. And a lot of times we're using the tool of a grazing animal's gut to actually accelerate that nutrient cycling. But we want to have plants that are drawing nutrients up from the soil strata through their roots, as well as taking gases out of the atmosphere through photosynthesis to create abundant plant life, forage for animals, and of course, hopefully, if we're doing everything right, also feeding carbon back into the soil and actually increasing soil carbon and sequestering that out of the atmosphere. And typically, the more verdant and happy the plant community is, the more effective our nutrient cycle is. Uh, Throughout all of these indicators, we really, really want to be focused on the soil surface. But you can see in this picture just how that nutrient cycle is playing out. Here's a decaying, it looks like a sheep here. A, See how that carcass is actually feeding nutrients back into the soil surface and allowing for even stronger plant growth. So there's always this exchange of nutrients between plant life, animal life, and sort of the inert chemistry of the earth. Um, when we're looking at the effectiveness of a nutrient cycle, we're looking at the rate of decomposition of litter at the soil surface. So um, you'll often hear us talk about different types of litter. Type 1 being sort of less decomposed, and type 2 being that more decomposed, incorporated plant material that's sort of becoming one with the soil again. Up next, we have energy flow. So, how effectively are we capturing solar energy? We think about that in terms of density of plants, the size of their leaves, how big your solar collectors are, and then the amount of time you have active photosynthesis throughout the growing season. And that is often really tied to the effectiveness of your water cycle, because water is usually the limiting source of growth in a system. Well, I guess I'm biased because I live in the arid West, but that's usually what I think about. So the more effective that water cycle is, the longer period of time through the growing season your grasses are effectively photosynthesizing, and the more of that the only free input we're ever going to get, solar energy, how effectively we're capturing that and using that to create sugars that, again, sequester carbon into the soil. We'll talk more about this fence line picture in class. Uh, the final ecosystem process that we talk about is community dynamics. So this is a measure of biodiversity. And generally, we think of this in terms of increased complexity, and diversity is the same as more resilience in a system. So the more diversity you have, the more stable populations within an ecosystem tend to be, because they're like the entire system is not over reliant on any one population or type of plant or animal. And so we're always managing for increased diversity because we want to create ecosystems that are highly resilient to disturbance, so that no matter what the conditions are, we have a predictable, high functioning outcome. So those are the 4 ecosystem processes. That's water cycle, nutrient cycle, energy flow, and community dynamics.